the Tower of London. A fortress of stone and secrets standing guard over the River Thames for nearly 1,000 years. To the world, it's a historic landmark, a dazzling home for the crown jewels. But to those who know its true history, it's a place of shadows, a stone cage where power, betrayal, and sorrow have soaked into the very walls. And when night falls, the whispers of the past don't just echo, they walk. Tonight, we're not just telling ghost stories, we're uncovering the chilling, true accounts of the headless phantoms that are said to still roam the tower's bloody grounds. To understand the ghosts, you have to understand the history. The tower wasn't built as a prison. It was a royal palace, a symbol of Norman power built by William the Conqueror. But its thick walls and isolated location made it the perfect place to lock away enemies of the state. Kings, queens, dukes, and commoners who dared to cross the monarchy found themselves staring at these grey walls, their final view of the world. The phrase, "sent to the tower," became a death sentence. The main stage for this grim theatre was Tower Green, a small, deceptively peaceful patch of grass within the walls. This was a place of so-called privilege. Most executions were public spectacles on nearby Tower Hill, meant to entertain and terrify the masses. But for those of high birth, particularly women, a private execution on Tower Green was a final small mercy, shielding them from the jeering crowds. But mercy is a strange word to use for what happened here, and it's from this very spot that the tower's most famous and most terrifying ghost emerges. You know her name, Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII, a woman whose ambition, intelligence, and charm captivated a king and changed the course of English history. She promised Henry a male heir, something his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, could not provide. Henry broke with the Catholic Church, declared himself the head of the Church of England, and married Anne, all for the hope of a son. But when Anne gave birth to a daughter, the future Queen Elizabeth I, the king's infatuation began to curdle into impatience and rage. Accused of treason, adultery, and even incest, charges that historians widely agree were fabricated, Anne's fate was sealed. On the morning of May 19, 1536, she was led from her rooms in the Queen's house to the scaffold on Tower Green. She faced her death with incredible bravery, but her end was brutal. In a final, twisted gesture of kindness, Henry hired an expert swordsman from France to ensure a clean cut, rather than the clumsy, often horrific work of the English executioner's axe. After the single, swift strike, her head was held aloft, and her tragic story came to an end. Or did it? For centuries, the ghost of Anne Boleyn has been the tower's most frequently sighted resident. She doesn't just appear as a faint, misty shape. Witnesses, from stoic yeoman warders to terrified tourists, have described seeing her in vivid detail. Often she is seen walking a sorrowful procession, leading a group of ghostly courtiers from the Queen's house towards the Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula, the place where her body was unceremoniously buried in an old arrow chest. But the most horrifying sightings are of Anne, as she was in her final moments. Headless. One of the most famous accounts comes from the 19th century. A captain of the guard, looking out from his window in the Martin Tower, saw a strange light in the locked and empty chapel. He watched, stunned, as a ghostly procession of knights and ladies in Tudor-era clothing marched down the aisle. At the head of the procession was the figure of a woman gliding towards the altar. As she turned, the captain realized with a jolt of pure terror that she had no head. He recognized her instantly from portraits as Anne Boleyn. The vision faded, and when he and his fellow officers broke into the chapel, they found it cold, dark, and utterly empty. Anne isn't just seen, she's felt. An overwhelming sense of sadness and despair is said to wash over people near the chapel or on Tower Green. But she's not the only noble lady to lose her head and linger in the tower. Let's talk about Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen. A tragic pawn in a political power play, this brilliant teenage girl was pushed onto the throne after the death of King Edward VI, but her reign was fleeting. Mary Van, Henry VIII's first daughter, had the support of the people and the military. Jane was quickly deposed, arrested, and taken to the Tower. At just 17 years old, she was executed on Tower Green, only moments after watching her own husband's headless body be carted away from his execution on Tower Hill. Today, her spirit, a lonely and sad figure in white, is often seen walking the battlements, a spectral silhouette against the London sky, forever searching for the husband she lost on that terrible day. But perhaps the most heartbreaking and active of the headless ghosts is that of Margaret Pole, the Countess of Salisbury. At 67 years old, she was an elderly woman from the rival Plantagenet line and a staunch Catholic. She was arrested by a paranoid Henry VIII simply because of her bloodline. She maintained her innocence to the very end. On May 27, 1541, she was brought to the scaffold. But unlike Anne Boleyn or Jane Grey, Margaret did not go quietly. When told to place her head on the block, she refused, shouting, "So should traitors do, and I am none." What followed was a scene of pure butchery. The inexperienced and likely terrified executioner chased the elderly countess around the scaffold, hacking at her with his axe. It reportedly took more than 10 strikes to finally kill her. It was a gruesome, undignified end that shocked even the hardened Londoners of the time. Is it any wonder her spirit is said to be one of the most enraged in the Tower? Her screaming, blood-soaked apparition has been seen reenacting her horrific final moments on the anniversary of her death. Witnesses report hearing her terrified cries and the sickening thud of the axe, a phantom echo of one of the Tower's most shameful acts. These aren't just isolated incidents. The White Tower, the oldest part of the fortress, is home to the White Lady, a mysterious figure whose scent of cheap perfume suddenly fills the air, causing an intense feeling of dread before she appears. Some say she's a long-forgotten noblewoman, forever trapped. Then there's the Bloody Tower. The name itself is a dead giveaway. This is where the 2 young princes, Edward V and his younger brother Richard, were allegedly murdered on the orders of their uncle, the Duke of Gloucester, who became King Richard III. The small figures of 2 boys in white nightgowns have been seen holding hands, their faces filled with fear, before they fade back into the stonework. Their discovery, or rather, the discovery of 2 small skeletons buried beneath a staircase in the 17th century, seemed to confirm the legend. Their ghosts are not headless, but their story is an inseparable part of the Tower's fabric of tragedy. The guards of the Tower, the yeoman warders, are military veterans who live within the fortress walls with their families. They are not people given to fantasy or flights of fancy. Yet many of them have stories they cannot explain. Strange sounds in the dead of night, doors unlocking themselves, the feeling of an icy hand on their shoulder in an empty corridor. One guard on night duty in the 1960s felt a strange pressure on his chest as he sat in a guard room. Looking down, he saw nothing. But when he stood up and looked in the mirror, he saw the horrific imprint of a pair of hands on his tunic. Another famous story involves a guard in the 1800s who encountered a large, shadowy bear emerging from a doorway. He lunged at it with his bayonet, only for the weapon to pass straight through and strike the door. The guard fainted from shock and reportedly died a few days later, the official cause of death listed as fright. So, what is it about the Tower of London? Why is it such a supercharged paranormal hotspot? Think about it. For centuries, this place has been a container for the most extreme human emotions: terror, grief, rage, and despair. It's like a battery that has been charged for 1,000 years with raw psychic energy. The stone walls have absorbed every scream, every tear, and every drop of blood. The stories of Anne Boleyn, Margaret Pole, and Jane Grey are particularly potent. Their deaths were not just executions, they were spectacles of power and brutality, designed to send a message. Is it possible that the sheer trauma and injustice of their final moments left an indelible stain on the very atmosphere of the place? An echo so powerful that it continues to play out over and over again for anyone sensitive enough to see or feel it? Today, millions of people walk through the Tower of London every year. They snap photos of the ravens, they marvel at the crown jewels, and they listen to the yeoman warders tell sanitized tales of its history. But as the sun sets and the last tourist leaves, the fortress returns to its residents. The ones who never left, the ones who still walk the battlements, roam the corridors, and replay their final tragic moments. The next time you see a picture of the tower, look beyond the postcard image. Look at the dark windows of the bloody tower, the quiet green where the scaffold once stood, and remember the true stories etched into its stones. Because the Tower of London is more than a museum. It's a tomb, a memorial, and a home to the headless shadows who are still walking. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the dark heart of the tower. If you're fascinated by the hidden, haunted histories of the world, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you do not miss our next deep dive into the unexplained. Let me know in the comments which haunted location we should explore next. Stay curious and watch your back.